Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. Daniel Defoe's biography. Daniel Defoe was an influential English writer and political figure, best known for his novels and his role in the development of the English novel. Born as Daniel Foe in 1662, a Presbyterian family, he changed his name to Defoe in 1695. His early career included trade and political involvement, and he faced financial difficulties at various points, including a bankruptcy in 1692. Defoe's literary career took off in 1697 with the publication of an essay upon projects, and he went on to produce significant works that included political pamphlets, poetry, and novels. His most famous novel, Robinson Crusoe, published in 1719, is often regarded as one of the first modern novels, marked by a complex protagonist and detailed narrative style. Defoe's writing was characterized by its depth of characterization and moral expression, with notable works such as Moll Flanders and A Journal of the Plague Year showcasing his innovative approach to storytelling. Despite facing numerous challenges, including imprisonment for seditious libel, Defoe's prolific output, with over 500 works attributed to him, solidified his legacy as a pioneering figure in English literature. He died in 1731, leaving behind a rich literary heritage that continues to be studied and admired today. Background to Robinson Crusoe. The adventures of Crusoe on his island, the main part of Defoe's novel, are based largely on the central incident in the life of an undisciplined Scotsman, Alexander Selkirk. Although it is possible, even likely, that Defoe met Selkirk before he wrote his book, he used only this one incident in the real sailor's turbulent history. In these days the island was known as the island of Juan Fernandez. Selkirk was not the first person to be stranded here. At least 2 other incidents of solitary survival are recorded. A Mosquito Guyanese Indian Will was abandoned there in 1681 when a group of buccaneers fled at the approach of unknown ships. The pilot of Will's ship claimed that another man had lived there for 5 years before being rescued some years before. 3 years later, Will was picked up alive and well by an expedition that contained William Dampier, a keen observer who was good enough to recount that journey and a subsequent one in 1703, which Selkirk attended. Dampier was sailing in command of a privateering expedition that consisted of 2 ships. Alexander was the first mate on one of them. The purpose was to harry the Spanish and Portuguese shipping off the estuary. Failing this, the buccaneers would try their fortune off the shore of Peru. As they reached the area of the Juan Fernandez Islands, the ships could not agree on a course of action. By a stroke of bad luck, the ships were separated. Selkirk's ship, the Cinque Ports, found herself in the Juan Fernandez Islands in great need of repair. Stradling, captain of the ship, preferred to keep an account of the rescue. "'Twas he that made the fire last night when he saw our ships, which he judged to be English. He had with him his clothes and bedding with a firelock, some powder, bullets, and tobacco, a hatchet, a knife, a kettle, a Bible, mathematical instruments, and books. He built 2 huts with pimento trees, covered them with long grass, and lined them with the skin of goats, which he killed himself. He was greatly pestered by cats and rats. At his first coming on board with us, he had so much forgot his language for want of use that we could scarcely understand him." Upon returning to England, Selkirk was interviewed by the writer Richard Steele. His story appeared in the periodical The Englishman and was a source of wonder for many. The bottom line: he is happiest who confines his wants to natural necessities. Robinson Crusoe summary. Robinson Crusoe is a youth of about 18 years old who resides in Hull, England. Although his father wishes him to become a lawyer, Crusoe dreams of going on sea voyages. He disregards the fact that his 2 older brothers are gone because of their need for adventure. His father cautions that a middle-class existence is the most stable. Robinson ignores him. When his parents refuse to let him take at least one journey, He runs away with a friend and secures free passage to London. Misfortune begins immediately, in the form of rough weather. The ship is forced to land at Yarmouth. When Crusoe's friend learns the circumstances under which he left his family, he becomes angry and tells him that he should have never come to the sea. They part, and Crusoe makes his way to London via land. He thinks briefly about going home, but cannot stand to be humiliated. He manages to find another voyage headed to Guiana. Once there, he wants to become a trader. On the way, the ship is attacked by Turkish pirates, who bring the crew and passengers into the Moorish port of Salé. Robinson is made a slave. For 2 years he plans an escape. An opportunity is presented when he is sent out with 2 Moorish youths to go fishing. Crusoe throws one overboard and tells the other one, called Xury, that he may stay if he is faithful. They anchor on what appears to be uninhabited land. Soon they see that black people live there. These natives are very friendly to Crusoe and Xury. At one point, the two see a Portuguese ship in the distance. They manage to paddle after it and get the attention of those on board. The captain is kind and says he will take them aboard for free and bring them to Brazil. Robinson goes to Brazil and leaves Xury with the captain. The captain and a widow in England are Crusoe's financial guardians. In the new country, Robinson observes that much wealth comes from plantations. He resolves to buy one for himself. After a few years, he has some partners, and they are all doing very well financially. Crusoe is presented with a new proposition: to begin a trading business. These men want to trade slaves, and they want Robinson to be the master of the trade post. Although he knows he has enough money, Crusoe decides to make the voyage. A terrible shipwreck occurs, and Robinson is the only survivor. He manages to make it to the shore of an island. Robinson remains on the island for 27 years. He is able to take many provisions from the ship. In that time, he recreates his English life, building homes, necessities, learning how to cook, raise goats, and crops. He is at first very miserable, but embraces religion as a balm for his unhappiness. He is able to convince himself that he lives a much better life here than he did in Europe, much more simple, much less wicked. He comes to appreciate his sovereignty over the entire island. One time he tries to use a boat to explore the rest of the island, but he is almost swept away and does not make the attempt again. He has pets whom he treats as subjects. There is no appearance of man until about 15 years into his stay. He sees a footprint and later observes cannibalistic savages eating prisoners. They don't live on the island. They come in canoes from a mainland not too far away. Robinson is filled with outrage and resolves to save the prisoners the next time these savages appear. Some years later they return. Using his guns, Crusoe scares them away and saves a young savage whom he names Friday. Friday is extremely grateful and becomes Robinson's devoted servant. He learns some English and takes on the Christian religion. For some years the two live happily. Then another ship of savages arrives with 3 prisoners. Together Crusoe and Friday are able to save 2 of them. One is a Spaniard, the other is Friday's father. Their reunion is very joyous. Both have come from the mainland close by. After a few months, they leave to bring back the rest of the Spaniard's men. Crusoe is happy that his island is being peopled. Before the Spaniard and Friday's father can return, a boat of European men comes ashore. There are 3 prisoners. While most of the men are exploring the island, Crusoe learns from one that he is the captain of a ship whose crew mutinied. Robinson says he will help them as long as they leave the authority of the island in his hands, and as long as they promise to take Friday and himself to England for free. The agreement is made. Together this little army manages to capture the rest of the crew and retake the captain's ship. Friday and Robinson are taken to England. Even though Crusoe has been gone 35 years, he finds that his plantations have done well and he is very wealthy. He gives money to the Portuguese captain and the widow who are so kind to him. He returns to the English countryside and settles there, marrying and having 3 children. When his wife dies, he once more goes to the sea. Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe in the context of the rise of the modern novel in 18th century England. Realism, individualism, print culture. When Daniel Defoe published Robinson Crusoe in 1719, it arrived at a moment of social and cultural change. Literacy was spreading, periodical literature and pamphlets were common, and more people were buying printed books. Readers were hungry for narratives that looked like ordinary life rather than classical epic or ornate verse. Defoe supplied that appetite by offering a long, sustained account in a single, convincing voice, a voice that reads like a private ledger of events, choices, and consequences. In doing so, he helped set expectations for the modern novel, a focused narrator, detailed everyday description, and a moral portrait of one person remaking their life. The book was not the first long prose tale in English, but it was unusual in the way it married lifelike detail to intimate, continuous narration. Defoe presented Crusoe as an eyewitness narrator, and he organized the story around practical problems and pragmatic solutions rather than around heroic spectacle. That combination made the extraordinary seem plausible, and it made readers at the time treat the story as both useful and morally instructive. Crusoe as an early modern novel. Two linked features explain why critics call Robinson Crusoe an early modern novel. First, Defoe framed the book as if it were a genuine first-person account. The title page, the framing devices, and the steady journal tone encouraged the reader to treat Crusoe as the author of his own narrative. That fiction of authorship made the tale feel immediate and trustworthy, and it narrowed the gap between story and documentary report. Second, the narrative concentrates on one ordinary individual rather than on kings, heroes, or mythic figures. Crusoe is an everyman whose life is measured by practical decisions, work, and moral reflection. The combination of plausible voice and a singular, ordinary protagonist shifted expectations about what long prose could do. Instead of offering exempla for the elite, the book proposed that a private life, described in careful detail, could be the proper subject of serious fiction. This double-move documentary framing plus individual-centered plot helped form the template of the English novel as it developed during the 18th century. Realism. The look of the everyday realism in Robinson Crusoe functions less as mimetic trickery and more as a strategy to secure belief. Defoe achieves this in two practical ways. First, the narrator is relentlessly specific about material things, tools, clothing, the layout of shelters, the accounting of food, and the management of goats and crops. Those small, repeated details anchor the narrative. They reassure the reader that Crusoe is a problem solver who faces concrete difficulties and works them out step by step. Second, the prose adopts the shape and voice of familiar documentary forms, journals, letters, and travel reports that readers already accepted as reliable. The plain, workmanlike opening line, "I was born in the year 1632, in the city of York, of a good family," reads like the beginning of a personal record and invites trust. Likewise, the shipwreck is narrated not as melodrama but as a list of losses and the facts that follow. "I am cast upon a horrible, desolate island, void of all hope of recovery. But I am alive." That measured tone turns disaster into a practical problem to be solved, which is precisely what realism requires. Defoe also keeps the emotional register deliberately even. Crusoe notes fear and sorrow, but he rarely indulges in rhetorical excess. The effect is one of sober reflection rather than drama. This steadiness lets the reader follow both outward actions and inward moral reckoning. The result is a kind of empirical psychology. We learn who Crusoe is not only from what he does, but from how he accounts for his actions in plain language. Individualism, the self made by work and reflection. One of Robinson Crusoe's quiet revolutions is its portrait of a self built through labor and thought. Crusoe is not merely a victim of fate. Stranded, he becomes an organizer, an engineer, an accountant, and an evaluator of his own life. Defoe makes survival into practical projects, inventorying what remains from the wreck, fashioning tools, clearing land, tending goats, and building shelters. Those tasks are narrated as tasks, not as stage props. The novel turns living into a sequence of solvable problems and shows character as the sum of repeated actions and the decisions behind them. That emphasis fits the values of 18th century England. A rising commercial class prized industry, thrift, and personal responsibility. Crusoe's story maps neatly onto those values. He does not inherit status. He acquires a mode of life by repeated labor and by making choices under pressure. The result is a form of moral economy where work is both practical necessity and proof of moral worth. Crusoe's inner life is written as an account. He measures days, counts provisions, and marks his own moral progress. The book therefore models a kind of subjectivity familiar to a reading public that was learning to think financially and morally in the same terms. The book's inwardness is as important as its outward work. Crusoe constantly examines his motives and reads Providence into events. His journal records not only what he does but why he believes he does it. That self-examination reads like an early kind of psychology. It is not abstract theorizing. It is a steady interior ledger, feelings noted, errors confessed, gratitude checked. That blend, action followed by reflection, is vital to the novel form Defoe helped invent. We follow a man who acts, then explains to himself and to us. That pattern invites readers to identify with the narrator's growth rather than merely admire his feats. In short, Crusoe teaches readers to see character as work plus conscience, and that combination became central to later novels. Print culture and the market for such stories. The shape and success of Robinson Crusoe cannot be separated from the print world that produced it. By 1719, Britain's print market had grown more complex and more accessible. Cheap pamphlets, broadsides, and periodicals circulated across towns and ports. People beyond the aristocracy were buying printed materials, merchants, traders, apprentices, and an expanding literate middle class. Defoe, who had worked as a pamphleteer, knew how to use that market. He framed his story not as decorative fiction but as a testimonial, as a journal, as a practical report. The title itself announced that mixture, the life and strange surprising adventures of Robinson Crusoe. Presenting the tale as an eyewitness account fitted well with readers used to travel narratives and news reports. That documentary cast did more than secure belief. It made the work modular and portable. Chapter by chapter, the book reads like a series of entries, which suited readers who encountered texts in newspapers, in coffeehouses, or in parts. The style also matched the habits of a reading public that expected utility from print information, moral example, entertainment. Publishers noticed what sold. First-person, realistic accounts circulated well because they felt useful and immediate. That commercial logic helped fix the novel's form. Defoe's mixture of practical detail, moral reflection, and an intimate voice proved profitable. The book was reprinted, adapted, and translated throughout Europe. Its success showed publishers that long fictional lives, told plainly, had a market beyond elite patronage. Print networks also shaped literary technique. The familiar shapes of letters, diaries, and reports are present in Crusoe's voice. Those forms had established conventions of evidence and immediacy, so when Defoe borrowed them he inherited their credibility. Readers recognized the patterns of report and testimony and therefore treated the fiction as plausibly informative. In short, the novel's voice, its chapter structure, and its close attention to daily detail are all responses to a growing print market hungry for readable, believable accounts. Religion, empire, and contradictions. Robinson Crusoe sits uneasily between two registers. On one side it is a eulogy to thrift, self-reliance, and industriousness. Crusoe claims and orders an island, he names things, he domesticates animals, he runs plantations later in life. Those features map onto the early modern logic of property and empire. Naming and managing land are exercises of control that mirror colonial practices. Crusoe's relationship with Friday, the act of naming, teaching, and converting, can be read as a model of colonial paternalism. The book thus contains clear strands that naturally a hierarchical ordering between European subject and non-European other. On the other side, the narrative is full of religious reflection and moral uncertainty. Crusoe repeatedly interprets his fortunes as signs from God. His journal records repentance and gratitude, and he frames many of his actions as responses to providence. Those passages complicate a simple heroic self-sufficiency. Crusoe's very sense of achievement is bound up with dependence on a providential order and on ethical reflection. That ambivalence makes the novel productive and controversial. Readers can admire the hero's resourcefulness while also noticing the moral cost of his dominion. The tension is precisely why the novel has remained a rich object for interpretation. It helped establish techniques of realism and individualism while participating in the ideological currents of empire and property. The text models the new commercial subject and the new global encounter at the same moment. That double bind is part of its historical power. It explains why Robinson Crusoe can be read as foundational for the modern novel, and also critiqued for the imperial attitudes it normalizes. The book gives readers a clear picture of the 18th century's promises and tensions, industriousness and faith, autonomy and domination, private conscience and public power.